Hey, I just finished the series from transactional to transformational relationships. And there's one key aspect I didn't touch on that I believe is the underlining theme to get us into those transformational relationships with ourselves and others, and that is intuition. Yeah, that little nudge that we receive when we are walking out in nature, or we're driving our car and we see a bumper sticker or a billboard with a certain message on it, or just having an overall sense, an intuitive guidance within us to bring more of a transformational experience in our lives. And so to bring forward that and to expand upon how to engage your own intuition is Arlo. No, it's it's Victoria Shaw. I've invited her because she has the expertise of her own psychotherapy experience and her intuitive guidance, one-on-one coaching that she offers. So she's going to bring forward ways to enhance your intuition, to bring more awareness to it, so that way you can experience more transformational relationships to yourself and others. And I can't wait for Arlo's little puppy teeth to transform, because, man, these little needles hurt. So I look forward to seeing you there.
Oh, welcome back, new and true friends. As you know, I just finished my series from transactional to transformational relationships. And I wanted to bring that forward to help everyone to kind of wake up to the idea of how we're connecting with ourselves and others. Because it's important to understand how we are the ripple effect, and being mindful and compassionate to ourselves creates an expansion within our hearts and our being. Yeah, and within this space, the space within ourselves, is where relationships expand into transformational ones. But there's another factor I believe that contributes to transformational relationships, or even transformational aspects to ourselves, that I would like to highlight, and that's intuition. So, intuition is that inner knowing that you're more than what your mind or social norms tell us that we are. And intuition, when we follow it, really enhances our lives and is the key to transformation, to experience that firsthand. And so I'm sure you can think of a time when you've experienced something that inspired you to take a leap of faith or to choose a different route, right? This intuition shows up maybe as subtle suggestions that you might feel within your body, or it might show up as words on a billboard or a bumper sticker, right? As you're driving along, or even an advertisement. And what this intuition is doing is validating that you're on the right path, or maybe even tapping you on the shoulder, right, to direct you to a different path. So what intuition does is it takes us out of that rational mind and places us in an experience and something new that leads us out of our box that we've placed ourselves in. And remember what I've talked about in past episodes about our belief systems, right? That old BS that keeps us safe. Stay between the lines. You can't go over there. It's not safe. Intuition really comes in and wants us, it's inviting us to become more. And this is what working from the inside out is all about. So, this is why I've invited Dr. Victoria Shaw here today to share her story of how intuition has led her on her path to transformation. So, a little bit about Victoria Shaw. She uses intuition as a spiritual GPS, and she believes that's the single best tool that we have to navigate in our lives. And Dr. Shaw draws on her intuitive gifts as well as her formal training in psychology and counseling to tap into the deeper wisdom of life and supports others in reaching their highest potential. So, thank you, Dr. Shaw. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. And I loved your introduction and I loved how you described intuition. That was so beautiful and so spot on and I think so aligned with how I see things. So thank you for that. That was lovely.
You're most welcome. And I'm just excited to be here with
Yeah.
you because we've connected right through the Mind Body Spirit.fm, uh, episodes, the podcast.
Right.
And there was just something about you that I wanted to connect with because I too have expanded through my own intuition, but it really wasn't easy at first because my mind kept saying, nope, can't go there, can't do this. But it's really about trusting in ourselves, don't you think? And
Yeah.
listening a little deeper.
Yeah. And I think all of us come into these bodies with our intuition intact. We can't not, because the way that I understand intuition is that it's that line, that direct connection that you have to your soul, which is who and what you really are. So you have all of that wisdom there all the time. But as we develop into, our human lives, and I call it in the first 7 years of our lives, we become humanized. And, for better or for worse, we often lose that connection because the people around us say, this is what you're allowed to know. This is how you're allowed to know it, and we start to disconnect from our own truth and start to plug back into that, socially conditioned consensual reality that says, this is what's right. This is what you can perceive. This is what you understand. This is what is acceptable. This is what is not. And so for many of us, we turn down the volume on our intuition. It doesn't go away. It's guiding you all the time. And that's the first thing I tell people when I teach intuition development. If you look at any good thing that's ever happened to you in your life, right? Your intuition took you there. Your mind might have taken credit. Your efforting might have taken credit, but your soul, your intuition is always nudging you, always guiding you. And it's just a lot of times the mind takes credit because we've been taught to give it to our minds. And I love having a mind. And I spent many, many years educating it and, collecting fancy degrees. And I don't regret a moment of it. But I've learned now that my mind is the tool that can be used by my inner wisdom and my higher knowing. And I think many of us live our lives where we are the tool of our mind. And that is a less fun way to live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I really enjoy hearing how you said about, our intuition is always there, that we just dial it down.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I teach intuition development, which I've been doing now for, well over a decade, the first thing I always have people do is reflect on, and oftentimes, you'll do this in a journal or in a meditation, but reflect on all the experiences you've had in your life with your intuition. So all those things, those moments when you knew something and you didn't know how you knew it, but it was right. And, I've been teaching this now for a really long time, many people all over the world. Maybe I always say maybe someone on this podcast will be the first one, but I have yet to come across someone who can't immediately think of at least one example where they had that experience. And then once we start reflecting, we realize it's not one example, it's happening all the time. It's happening all the time. And then when we start to tune into it's how it's happening all the time, it starts to grow because what we focus on grows. And as we pay attention, we're just opening up that channel for ourselves. So that's really the first step to, getting back in touch with your intuition is just, start noticing where it's already happening because it is all the time.
It is. It so is. And I think it's also learning to trust in ourselves too. Especially if we've been taught or raised in an environment to where, nope, you have to do it this way.
Right.
And looking to others to seek validation that we are doing the right things. And, it's not right or wrong. I want everybody to hear that. It's just how we are developed and the human conditioning, you
Right.
know.
And I like to think about it not as right or wrong, but what your intuition does is it keeps you aligned. So it keeps you aligned with your higher path, your higher self. Where are you gonna have the most flow? Where are you gonna reach your deepest desires more directly, more quickly? What if you're into law of attraction speak, which I am, what Esther Hicks and Abraham would call the path of least resistance, or I love the term the path of most allowance. Right. And it's not just about getting what you want. It's about living in alignment with your soul, which means everything falls into place. Everything feels more purposeful, more meaningful, more joyous. And even when we're guided into places that feel a little bit uncomfortable, it helps us, find our meaning and purpose there too.
Mhm.
So intuition is what connects you with that. It's what aligns you with your source, with your highest self. And I know these are heady concepts, and I don't know how heady your listeners go, but there's also real practical aspects too, because when we feel that alignment, that's when we can feel really at home within ourselves everywhere. And that's when we can start to, find our way to where we want to go all the time, if that makes sense. And
Mm,
intuition does that for you again and again and again and again. What your mind does, unfortunately, is it creates a series of problems for you to solve. And again, it's good to have a mind, and it's good to, have that problem solving tool. But when it's left to its own devices, unmoored from that deeper wisdom, it just tends to, move you in circles and keep you kind of in that same spot, which is interesting, but not really fulfilling on that deeper level.
yeah, that's the fulfillment. That's the transformational that I'm talking about by following intuition. So I would not be here today doing what I'm doing without following my intuition. And people kept saying things to me about podcasting or meditation or other modalities that I offer. And then it brought that curiosity of, oh, I wonder, or oh, that's interesting, let me check that out, instead of focusing on my mind saying, well, how's that going to happen, or what, I don't know about that. No one's going to listen to me podcasting, or the mind likes to talk us out of things because it wants to keep us safe,
Right,
right?
right. And many times what your mind does is it says, if I scare you enough, then nothing bad can happen to you, right? If I keep you in this, constant state of fear and worry and, self-criticism for some of us, then, the world will not hurt you because you're doing it all inside. But the bad part of that is, it keeps us in a constant state of unnecessary misery.
Mm.
And your mind actually can't protect you from everything that could possibly go wrong. Because I have news for you, an infinite number of things could go wrong. They won't. You're safe. Life is happening for you, and you are so loved and lovable and beautiful. And I just want all your listeners to know that. And your mind, doesn't always believe that. And so, it hasn't been trained to believe that. It's been trained to prevent, it's been trained to convince you that you can prevent anything bad from ever happening to you by scaring the pants off yourself. And,
Hmm.
it doesn't work that way. And it's not very comfortable to live that way. So your intuition is the one that will come in if you need a warning sign, if you need that guidance, if you have this great idea that didn't come from your intuition, if you listen deeply, will guide you through that and help you find your way. But it'll never trash talk you. It'll never tell you, I always say if it's unkind, it's your mind. It's not your inner knowing. And it'll always guide you in the most gentle, loving, life affirming way possible. It can't not, because it comes from your soul and source and a place that's all loving. And so when we learn to tune in more to that, we start to experience our lives more like that, more from that soul-based perspective. And then the mind becomes the sweet little pet, the sweet little tool that, we can use. Like I said, I trained mine really hard. I have like multiple degrees from fancy schools, and I love it all. But I don't make it who I am anymore.
Mm. Yeah, and Victoria, you said something that really like ding for me. If it's unkind, it is your mind
Always.
and it's not your intuition working. I think
Yeah.
that's so important for people to witness that. And, our minds are so amazing. I'm not discrediting it, as you have said.
Yeah.
And it's a good tool to help support us, although it's living that transformational life, right? Living through intuition. And this is what living's all about. Yeah. So
Sure.
for people who are curious or they've recognized when they've had intuitive moments and they can say, yes, I remember when this happened and I just had this feeling or I had a dream or I had a vision or I just had an inner knowing about something, but it's just few and far between. How can they learn to tap more into their intuition? What are some tips that you can offer?
Beautifulness. The first thing is to set the intention, because where our intention goes, the energy flows. And so soon, I always say when I teach intuition development, the minute you download the class or sign up for the class or listen to the podcast or buy the book, do all of those things or any of those things, right? That resonate with you. The moment you do that, you've already started the process. In fact, the process probably even started before you did that, right? And so intention is so important, because setting that intention, it tells the universe, it tells our higher selves, it marshals the energy in that direction, and it's huge. And you're also starting to tell yourself, hey, this is okay. This is safe. This is something I want to do. And that's really important too. So intention is the first and most important step. And anyone who's found themselves to this moment now you've probably already set that intention. And then the next step is, again, like I said before, notice where it's already happening. Just start to pay attention. I often invite people to keep a running journal of, what I think is my intuition. And you'll know pretty quickly if it is, because, occasionally we do get really excited about something. We think it's our intuition. It's just our mind getting really worked up, and that's okay. But you'll start to, as you start to record and journal and pay attention, you'll start to learn to discern the difference between those quiet, subtle, nudges that really pay off and the noisy chatter of your mind. So the next thing is to pay attention, and you'll start to see too that it's happening everywhere. It's like when you go to buy a new car and you're thinking like, "Ooh, I think I want a Toyota Prius." And you've never seen one on the road before until you decide that you're interested in buying one, and then it's like every car. It will be exactly like that with your intuition. As soon as you start to look for it, you'll find it everywhere. And
It's
then the more
so
you
true.
notice it, yeah, the more you notice, the more you start to make that connection. So that's the first step. And then the next thing I invite people to do is start to notice how it's speaking to you, right? Because it's already happening and we all have our preferred ways. And sometimes we get caught, especially my students that have been doing this a long time, and they've taken all the classes and they've read all the books and they've, watched all the psychics, and they have a very strong idea of how it's supposed to be. And oftentimes our intuition is really subtle. Even, my own, and I give intuitive readings for a living, and I've been doing it for 15 years. Um, but oftentimes it's really gentle, it's really subtle, it's not how we think it is. And so when we start to recognize how our intuition is speaking uniquely to us, rather than trying to do what we think we're supposed to do or what someone else tells us it should look like, or being like that person we saw on TV, and we start to really learn the unique code of our own inner knowing, because it comes from your soul, and it's completely unique to you. That's also where the magic happens. So that's what I invite people to do next, is to just notice, is it a body sensation that I usually get? Is it that just a little like calm voice in my head, or a full body sense of knowing? Or, do I find myself having these synchronicities where these things, like for me, for years as a child, I would knew all the good things that came into my life just happened. They weren't things I tried to do. They would just happen again and again and again. The really great things that I've manifested into my life just happened. And I didn't have a spiritual framework for understanding that at the time, but I just knew. And that still is very powerful in my life. Things just happen for me. My mind can try to make all sorts of things happen, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but the really good stuff just falls in my lap, and it always
Hmm.
has. So learning how your intuition is working for you is step number 2. And then step number 3, see how easy this is learning to trust it. And that's, where a lot of people do get hung up. And a lot of people too get hung up on, is it my mind? Is it my intuition? Is a big one. And also, is it even safe to listen to this thing? And many of us have a lot of conditioning that say it's not safe, right? Because we were a little child and we came to our parents one day, or a caregiver, or even a friend, and we knew something, and they looked at us and they said, how do you know that? You don't know that, like that. Or we were intuiting something that a parent was feeling or didn't want us to know. And we said, Mommy, are you okay? And Mom said, of course I'm okay. Nothing's wrong, go away. And so we felt invalidated, and we felt maybe even a little shamed, and we shut it down, and we learned that it wasn't safe. So this is an opportunity for you to be your own inner parent now, and tell that little child within you, it's okay now. You can bring that part out to play. That wisdom is safe with us now. And it's also, and this is something you alluded to before, around, hearing your own truth. Because oftentimes when people's intuition starts to open up and they start to learn about all this spiritual world and spiritual stuff, they suddenly need everyone else in their world to validate that for them and to agree with them. It almost doesn't feel safe and real and true if everyone else in their world doesn't agree with it.
Yeah.
And I understand that. And as you fall into your own truth, you will find more and more people that share it with you and bring them into your world. And that will feel really good, because human beings like that validation. But you can't wait for that. And you have to understand that everyone's truth is unique to them. And everyone's perspective is unique to them. And what you really want to do in this human lifetime is honor your own perspective, and connect with your own inner truth, live your own light. And that really has nothing to do with anybody else, right?
Doesn't, does it?
Like, not even a teensy tiny little bit. So
No.
yeah, so trusting your intuition is, like you said before, it's trusting in yourself and not needing somebody else to validate it for you. And that can be a big one for people.
Hmm. Yeah, especially if we're taught, right, to look outside of ourselves and how people are responding to us to tell us if we're good or bad, or, that type of thing. And we unpack that in the from transactional to transformational relationships, and then just by, just leaning into the intuition and becoming curious of, oh, I kind of feel this way about that. I wonder how this is going to unfold for me. Um, you know, Turning worry into wonder also helps lift off the pressures that our minds put on ourselves too. So, yeah, I really love how you were talking about that, Victoria, of the just being open and listening
Yeah.
without expectations, because that's
Yes,
what we
ma'am.
do as humans. We look at other people, how are they doing it? Well, this person, like you said, on YouTube or wherever they were, are doing these big grandiose things. And here I feel like I have a little mouse here on my shoulder,
Yeah.
and
I have
that's
a
okay.
Yeah, you said so much in there. And I want to unpack it all and respond to it all. But my favorite example is, I had a dear friend. And she would come to all of my teachings and all of my things for many, many, many years. And she had worked with like I would always joke, you're like my lucky charm, because every psychic, every energy healer before they went, viral, she was their student. And she would be like, but I want my intuition to like speak to me the way yours does. Like, I work with people, like I want to do what you do. And I was like, but the thing is, your intuition, like when you get going, and she does like a lot of body code, emotion code. I mean, she does all sorts of things, and she has an amazing gift of putting different tool sets together. She's highly creative. And I've worked with her, and I've seen when she works, the words just come out of her mouth,
Mm.
right? And she just knows what to say. And I'm like, that's your intuition. She's like, what? I was like, listen to yourself when you work. That's your intuition. Right. And so, she was like, oh, right. And now she hears it more and more in many different ways. But it's around starting to recognize how it's already working for you. and understanding that it is always working for you. And whenever we're trying to be somebody else, and it's okay to be inspired by what someone else does and want to have more of that into your space. I'm all about inspiration, but not as a way of saying I won't have it until I have that, right?
Say that
It's
again.
that I won't have it until I have that, because oftentimes that was what we do, right? I'll be happy when, I'll be accomplished when, I'll be there when. Where are you now? Find where it's working for you now, because that is the bestest way to attract more of it. And also, it's the best way to feel good, which is what we all want. So we don't have to wait for that. We can find it right here and now just by, attuning our attention to where things are flowing. But you said something else that I also really want to follow up on because I love it. From worry to wonder. What a beautiful phrase, and what a beautiful concept. And also, what a beautiful way of encapsulating what happens when we move from a more mind-based to a more intuitively guided way of life. Because your soul is very playful and very curious. In fact, it is curiosity that brought you into this human experience in the best possible ways. And wonder is one of my favorite words. So I love that word. And, your human mind has been taught to make everything so very serious. And oftentimes, too, when I teach intuition development, people want to get really serious. They want to understand and they want to know from their mind, like the left side of their brain. And you can do that, but it will limit you because that's not where your intuition comes from. Your intuition comes from a place of perpetual joy and play and lightness. It's not serious at all, even if you're asking serious questions or questions that feel serious to you. Your higher self always has a much more playful approach to things. And so when we can be playful and light with it, that helps us connect more. And again, we also feel good while we're doing it, which I'm a big fan of.
Oh, I completely agree 100% about the playfulness. So, for example, if I'm feeling too heady, in my mind about things, I'll put on some music and I'll just dance and I'll let my body move, and I'm literally like moving energy and becoming more light and open. And I tell you, Victoria, if it's something that's been really weighing on my mind, within the hour, if not 24 hours after that, something will come in and it just affirms whatever it is. So um it's just, yeah, go out for a walk in nature, be where wherever it brings you joy, really.
Yeah,
If it's talking to a really good friend that you guys really harmonize with, and there's no judgment there, and you feel complete connection and love and appreciation, uh, be in that space, and with others too, as we're doing here together. Co-creating is an amazing way to get those intuitive juices and that flowing through us.
love it. And you said something else too in there that I think is so important. When we are trying to, oftentimes we want to use our intuition to solve a problem, right? Because, our mind isn't getting us anywhere. And so we want to use our intuition the way we want to use our mind. What happens is when you are very focused on a problem, right, it is very hard for you to hear your inner guidance because you're not looking there and you're not sending off a vibe that is in alignment with receiving those nudges. So when you are really focused on a problem, and I even see this sometimes when I'm giving intuitive readings, sometimes I can get people out of it because I am vibing with a different bandwidth and they just naturally flow over to mine. But there are times when I just have to wait, I'm just like, I'm going to say this, but it's going to ping right off of your energy field, but maybe you'll hear it later. But intuition is always an act of letting go. It's always an act of surrender. It's always, you have to you have to release the mind and still the mind to hear your inner wisdom, right? And sometimes if we're really focused on a problem, we don't want to do that. So by dancing, by being in nature, by meditating, by talking with a friend, by thinking about anything other than your problem, by letting it go, right? You've already sent out the ping that you wanted that support. So it's there, it's waiting to come when we can take that step back and, create a little bit more space between our thoughts and space between ourselves and that perceived problem. we've also created space to receive, those nudges and the wisdom and the guidance. Okay. And so when you find yourself, just really focused on a problem and you're like, I don't understand why I can't. And it happens to me too. And I do this for a living. I always know in those moments, I just got to let it go. I got to let it go and then it will flow every time.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I love that image. And sometimes exactly what I do is I go for a hike. That's my happy place, or a walk on the beach. And I just let it go. And I trust that I'll always get an answer. I always get an answer, but you have to let go in order to receive. That's just how intuition works. It's always an act of surrender.
Hmm. Yeah, because we're carrying around a lot of baggage, right? And our
Yeah.
literally in our bodies and our energy. And if we're still holding on to those things, there's no open space for that to flow in easily.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Or you won't recognize when it does, because when you're really stuck in your story,
Ah, yeah.
right? Our intuition's not in the story, right? But if you're looking like this, it's like you got this tunnel vision, your intuition's over here, but you're like not able to hear it. So sometimes we do have to take that step back. And sometimes too, that's why I feel, when I work with people, what I always say is I'm the mouthpiece for your soul, for your higher guidance, for your source connection. That's what I think that I do. Occasionally, I know things that my clients don't know. I've been on this journey a long time, and I've mentioned lots of degrees. So sometimes my intuition will ping some of those other things that I know, and I go into teacher mode, and that can be helpful too. But most of what I'm doing, and even in those moments, my guidance is reminding me I'm still doing the same thing. I'm just doing it in a slightly different way. I'm the mouthpiece for your inner wisdom. And sometimes it just is easier to hear it when it comes out of someone else's lips, right?
It's so true.
And,
It's like your
that's
parents
it.
telling you things all the time,
Yeah.
and then you hear it from somebody else, and you're like, "Oh, sure." I'm sure everybody
Yeah.
that has been a parent can relate to that.
Yes,
You
ma'am. I've worked
tell
with a
your
lot of
kids,
parents and a lot of children.
yeah, and then some stranger or somebody else tells them the same thing, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense." So,
Yeah.
oh, that was
Sometimes
a
you
great
just
point.
can't hear it. Yeah. And I always tell people at the beginning, like if I have a new client at the beginning of a session, I always say, look, I'm pretty good at what I do. But not everything's going to land, and not everything should land. And I think that we need to approach every aspect in our life like this, not just an intuitive reading, but pretty much every bit of information that you get from any outside source, you should always play this game with. And I always say, take what resonates and let the rest go.
Mm.
And people know what resonates, what fits. And sometimes people aren't sure, and that's okay too, because if you need to hear it again, you'll hear it again, right? I know sometimes I'll tell people something, and 5 years later, I'll get an email, that thing that you told me 5 years ago, I understand it now. I'm like, great, I don't remember it, but I'm glad you do. Right. But we all have that built in, and that's your intuition too, by the way, that tells us, ooh, this feels right. The number of people when I ask, like, how did you find me? Because, for years, not so much anymore, but for years, when I was living in Connecticut, I was practicing both as a psychotherapist and as an intuitive. And most of my clients over the years would come to me for both at once, but every once in a while, someone would come just for psychotherapy. And I'd always want to be able to meet my clients where they were at. So I didn't want to throw the full toolkit in their lap if that's not what they were signing up for. So I would always ask this question, why did you choose me? How did you find me? Because it would be an important clue to know, um, you know, how open they were to all the tools in my toolbox. But what I discovered was the answers were so illuminating. Because so often people would just be like, yeah, just something that was just, I just knew, like something drew me to you. I saw your picture there. I liked your energy, right? And that's your intuition at work, right? Something about me that just awoke something in them. And they said, okay, I got to do this. And, when I guest on podcasts and, people will call me, I saw you on a podcast and I just knew I needed to call you. Right. And it's just, that's your intuition. And you may listen to this and you might not want to call me, and that is okay too, because you'll find that resonance with somebody else. But that's your intuition at work. And we should always be using that. And we're taught, not to trust it, but the more that you do, the more you'll be able to vet every bit of information that you get from that world outside there with your inner knowing, and that's where all the magic happens.
Mm, yeah. This is why I have you here.
Yay. I could talk about this all day. Duh.
Yes, it's all about co-creating and expanding wellness. And I love to bring, different ways so people can think about wellness and to apply that in different aspects of their life. So it's really important to tune into that intuition, to follow those nudges, because I'm sure everybody can raise their hand here to when they didn't follow it and they were kicking themselves. Like, I should have
Yes.
listened to that. I had that little voice, or I felt that in my gut and I didn't listen. And then this is where I'm at now. I believe that we can't get it wrong, as Abraham Hicks says, and you're never, you can't get it wrong. And, there's always
Wherever
more,
you are
right?
is the right place to be because you find
Yes.
yourself here. And those moments when you got those nudges and you went a different way are some of my favorite nudge moments. And the reason they're some of my favorite moments is because those are the moments when you know your intuition is working. They are the most validating, and they're often the ones we don't forget. And not only that, but now you can listen. Sometimes our mind will come in and say, you should have listened to that. You should have done that. Now you're sunk forever on this wrong path. No, you're not. What that knowing is telling you is, number one, you did have some powerful information about something, and maybe you chose not to pay attention to it or take a different path. That's fine. But you still have that. You still have that intact. So now listen again. Give yourself permission to hear, and it will guide you right back in the right direction, because it's a GPS, right? If you are driving down the highway and you get off at the wrong exit, what does your GPS do for you? It gets you back on the highway, right? And also, sometimes there's not a wrong exit. Sometimes there's
Yeah.
something that you wanted to see along the way, right? So
Yeah.
it's okay. There's no wrong turns. Your curiosity and your human conditioning both guide you in all sorts of fascinating places. And there's something to be gained from every moment of this human experience, no matter how you're playing it. And when you play it more in accordance and more in alignment with your soul, that's when every wrong, right turn and everything in between, because there isn't really a wrong or right, becomes more joyous and delightful and delicious, because in each moment you're pinging back up to that wise part of yourself and saying, okay, now what?
Mhm.
Show me, show me, show me, hold me, teach me, love me, align
Yeah.
me, and it will every single time.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. And then again, building that trust within
Yes.
ourselves and in the intuition. And that's when we have transformational things happen in our lives by following that. Oh, this has been so lovely having you here,
Oh, likewise.
Victoria. And so, what coming things do you have? I understand that you have a little retreat center there
I
in Southern
do.
California.
So I do. The next thing I'm gonna, so I have Cactus Blossom Retreat, which was my business venture that I came to California to do, and didn't know I was doing it until it's been one of those things where I completely followed my intuition every step of the way. Had no desire to build this kind of business. It was just given to me, but it's up and running and it's doing really well. So yay. It's a beautiful property about 45 minutes from downtown San Diego in the mountains, and it's just magical. So we lead retreats, we host other people's retreats, we do personalized retreats. So people that want to come with a group of friends or even by themselves, and we'll put together a whole experience for you. And the next event that I'm going to be doing there, because the calendar got so booked that so quickly that I forgot to reserve space. The next thing I personally am going to be doing there is Awakening Your Intuition weekend retreat in September. So that is coming in September of 2024. And then I have all sorts of online things happening too. I have the Art and Science of Intuition webinar with coming up, co-hosted by the California Institute of Human Science. Sorry, I had to close my eyes to
Mm,
get that right. And that one's going to be, I think, the month of May. I think we're meeting Wednesdays in the month of May. That's going to be really fun. But I do all sorts of teaching and fun things, and I have a podcast as well. April's going to be my guest, so stay tuned for that as well. And that's it, and also on Mind Body Spirit FM, and that is intuitive connection, and that is my joy and my love project, where we come on every week and talk about how you can live a more divinely inspired and intuitively guided life. And so that's my joy, and then I of course do private readings for people all over the planet. And I have a group coaching and mentoring group as well, where we do more group readings and intuition development. And that meets monthly or bi-monthly.
Oh, wow.
So
That's just a
that's
treasure chest
that's
of good
all the
stuff
fun.
there.
Yeah, those are all the fun things that I get to do. I have a
And
beautiful,
so they
blessed
can
and
find that.
charmed life.
Yes. Yeah. And they can find that information on your website then? What is your website?
So everything about the podcast, the online teaching, the local the I can speak the readings and anything that's local here in San Diego would be victoriashawintuitive.com. And then the retreat center, which for some reason is not linked to victoriashawintuitive.com, but probably should be. That's the other way around. But my retreat is called Cactus Blossom Retreat. And that is also cactusblossomretreat.com. So those are two places that you can find me.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I've done my research. Everybody knows that, people that I bring on to my podcasts, I connect with them and do my research. And that retreat center looks absolutely amazing. And I'm excited to possibly be out there next year to offer something, possibly co-creating here, expanding the collective
So fun.
consciousness with you, Victoria, and other wonderful souls.
We would love to
Yeah.
have you. That would be
Yeah.
amazing. Amazing. We
Oh,
do have dates available for next year. This year,
yes.
it was such a blessing, but I literally looked down at the calendar and I was like, oh my God. We have a few in the fall, so we're not totally booked up, but we're getting there.
Wonderful. Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Victoria, for being here and for sharing your intuition and helping me to expand the collective consciousness here.
Thank you. Thank you for doing what you do. And this was so much fun. I'm very grateful and appreciative.
Yeah, and for those of you watching, listening, please leave a comment. Let Dr. Shaw know, Victoria, know what you enjoyed about this discussion today, how your intuition is coming through, or any questions you might have. I'm sure she would love to hear from you as well as I would too. And, please like, subscribe, share with others who you feel could use this support to help follow their intuition too. So that way they can lead a more of a transformational life. So until next time, my friends, be well.